Don't forget to go to AshKicking.com for pound the best home health and beauty fragrance products.
Hi, you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation. Woo!
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Gennady Golovkin's trainer, Abel Sanchez, he gave his take on Danny Jacobs' performance over Selecki this past weekend. According to Abel Sanchez, it was a terrible performance by Danny Jacobs. Matter of fact, this is what Abel Sanchez had to say. Danny Jacobs was supposed to demolish Luis Arias and had a difficult time with him in his first fight after Gennady. And now in this fight against Selecki, he looks terrible. He gets hit with everything in the book. But the reason being, in my opinion, and I think in opinion of our team, is once you go 12 rounds with Golovkin, you're never going to be the same. You know, it's not just Jacobs. If you go back to Lemieux, to Curtis Stevens, to Wade, to Willie Monroe, they're never the same. They're never the same after they go rounds with Golovkin. Murray, also the young man from England, has never been the same since Gennady fought him, end quote. So with everything that Golovkin's trainer just said right now about Danny Jacobs, if that is the case, doesn't that mean Gennady Golovkin should be in a hurry to fight against the guy that has never been the same since he got in the ring with Gennady Golovkin? I mean, that's like chopping down trees, right? You run across a tree and for whatever reason, you chop at it, but you leave it standing. You walk away and you tell people, oh man, I did so much damage to that tree. All you got to do is probably push it and that tree is going to fall down. Well, if that's the case, why don't you go back to that tree and continue chopping it until it falls down, right? It's the same situation with Danny Jacobs. It's called unfinished business. You're taking credit for Danny Jacobs not being the same fighter, and you're saying that Danny Jacobs looked terrible in his last fight. So if he looked terrible, that's even more of a reason to fight this guy and show how it would be so much easier in the rematch because of all of the damage you inflicted on Danny Jacobs in the first fight. That makes all the sense in the world, right? Something else Abel Sanchez did by talking about how terrible Danny Jacobs looked is he eliminated any of the excuses that fans are using that Golovkin is too old to be facing tough competition like Danny Jacobs. Because if Golovkin's trainer is saying that Danny Jacobs is no longer the same, then that means that Abel Sanchez, he doesn't believe that Golovkin Golovkin is at any type of disadvantage in a rematch. He believes that Golovkin will be at an advantage, if anything, if he were to fight against Danny Jacobs again. So once again, why would he not fight this guy? Matter of fact, let's take that question even further. Why would Gennady Golovkin vacate his belt? Why would he hand his belt over to Danny Jacobs as opposed to facing him? If Danny Jacobs looks so terrible and it's all because of the damage that Golovkin inflicted in their first fight. The funny thing about Abel Sanchez saying this is going into that fight, Danny Jacobs had already been knocked out before he fought against Gennady Golovkin. So you would think that if Danny Jacobs had got knocked out before by an opponent who hasn't accomplished as much as Gennady Golovkin, you would ask yourself, how come Gennady Golovkin wasn't able to knock this man out? But according to Abel Sanchez, Danny Jacobs is not the same fighter because of Gennady Golovkin. But he couldn't knock out a fighter who had already been knocked out previously? How does that add up? It doesn't add up. And something else you probably noticed is in that interview, Abel Sanchez, he never directly said that we want the rematch with Danny Jacobs. Just in case you guys don't understand the situation, Danny Jacobs is now Golovkin's mandatory. So just like Golovkin is going to have to fight these three fighters you see in these in this picture right here, either Danny Jacobs, Jermall Charlo, or Sergey Derenyevchenko, the reason why he's going to have to fight all three of these guys is because all three of these guys are his mandatories. Okay? That means if he doesn't fight these guys, he will be stripped of his belts. And according to Abel Sanchez and Golovkin, their goal was to be a unified champion. So this is the reason why we're talking so much about Golovkin possibly fighting the guy that will never be the same because he was in the ring with Gennady Golovkin. Let's see if Gennady Golovkin takes the rematch with Danny Jacobs. Let's see if Gennady Golovkin defends his belts and faces the number one contender, Jermall Charlo, or Sergey Derenyevchenko. Let's see what happens, guys. And I'm going to keep saying this. For anyone making the silly excuse that Golovkin is too old to face tough competition, he's 36 years old. And it's very important to note that none of you guys were saying this when Golovkin was trying to get a fight with Canelo Alvarez. But you say it when his mandatories are Jermall Charlo, Sergey Derenyevchenko, and Danny Jacobs. That does not add up. It doesn't make sense. Okay? You can't be old. You can't be too old for Charlo, but not too old for Canelo Alvarez. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't add up. So Golovkin, once again, is in a very, very tough situation. The walls are closing in. And now, for the first time, Golovkin, he has an opportunity to prove if he's a great fighter or if he really was an overrated fighter. These are the type of opponents to prove that. Jermall Charlo, Danny Jacobs rematch, and Sergey Derenyevchenko. For those of you guys who aren't too familiar with Sergey Derenyevchenko, he's a Ukrainian undefeated Olympian. He went to the Olympics just like Golovkin did. According to Derenyevchenko's promoter, Lou DiBella, Golovkin knows Sergey very well. They came up in the amateurs together, and he knows how good Sergey is. So these are all tough challenges. And these are the type of opponents that will define Gennady Golovkin's career and his stance and position in the sport of boxing in terms of legacy. Because if Gennady Golovkin were to retire today, what would he be known for? What would be some of his most defining wins, his most impressive wins? Well, right now, Golovkin's most impressive wins are knockouts over fighters like Dominic Wade, David Lemieux. Who else? Who else did he knock out clean with no controversy? Maybe Martin Murray you can throw in there. These are the defining wins that Golovkin would be known for today. You can't add the Danny Jacobs win because a lot of people think that he lost the Danny Jacobs fight. And you can't add the Canelo fight because that fight ended in a draw. Some people thought Golovkin won. Some people thought Canelo won. He does not have a defining win without controversy over the top elite special opponents.